Okay, hi everybody. Um, I just had quick housekeeping rule if you didn't hear me the first time to please put your phones on silent. Welcome to the University of Victoria Legacy Art Galleries. We are stewards of the university's art collection, and we are part of the UVic Libraries. The UVic Legacy Art Gallery is home to over 18,000 pieces of art that are displayed on campus and held within our storage facilities. As a university art gallery and museum, we play an important role in bringing artists and community members together through the appreciation and love of the arts to discuss issues that matter. Tanzi, my name is Laura Lee Wastasakut. I'm Cree from Peguis First Nation and York Factory in northern Manitoba. I grew up in Winnipeg, and I am the curator of Indigenous art and engagement here at the Legacy Art Gallery. I have been a grateful visitor here since 2010 when I relocated to these lands from Winnipeg. With that, I would like to introduce our knowledge keeper, Terry Barnhart, who plays an important role in our gallery and community by offering wisdom, guidance, and cultural knowledge that enriches the experiences of our team, students, faculty, staff, and visitors for programming such as this to do our welcome and territory acknowledgement.
Hello, everybody. It's great to see you all here. Good afternoon. Aisquecho, Esaduchi or Terry. My late mother was Janet Dick. Skip Dick and Butch Dick are my maternal uncles, who I not only love and admire, but have inspired me to start this journey that I am on. To the other relations that I see in the room, I would like to say Qantas Kunalahela. On behalf of my family and myself, we'd like to welcome each and every one of you here. Welcome to Victoria. Welcome to the Legacy Art Gallery. Welcome to the lands of the Lekwungen people, lands of smoked herring. We are on the lands of the Lekwungen people. We are a joint nation of Songhees and Esquimalt. We were one before treaties and borders. At this time, I would like to thank the Legacy Art Gallery for allowing this time to follow cultural protocols in our lands. I am new at finding my voice, but I know this work needs to get done. Asiyam Nachalacha, Hesaduchi or Terry, to Ethlasanet Lekwungen, Heichka Kwansla Etla, Heichka Kwansla Techo Elanuk at Lekwungen, Heichka Siem. Good afternoon. It's great to be back here at the Legacy Art Gallery. Thank you for having me here. The stunning displays of drawings, paintings, etc. has always left me in awe every time I've been here. I have been very fortunate to see a lot of different displays here and very honored to see the works of the choruses speaking and rooting the reclamation. I have told many people about this place and I hope that they have come. A lot of them don't know about it here. And number two, I hope to book them a lot to your webpage for further events. At this time, I would like to thank Teresa and the whole team for everything they've done to get today going. My hands are up to you. It's not an easy task what you put on. And to the artists, Charles, Syrus, Karin, Chantal, Jenelle, thank you for being here today. Thank you for sharing your art, and thank you for telling us your stories throughout some of your art form so that we can understand. And to our guests here today, I would like to say thank you for taking the time to come out here today to see this. And thank you for supporting the Legacy Art Gallery. Now let's enjoy the exhibit. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. So it is our pleasure to host you all here today to bring together a chorus of voices from our current exhibition, The Chorus is Speaking, with artists Charles Campbell, Karin Jones, Chantal Gibson, and Syrus Marcus Ware. Today's panel will be moderated by one of the co-curators, Jenelle Pasiechnik, who is a curator at the Campbell River Art Gallery. Charles Campbell is a Jamaican-born multidisciplinary artist, writer, and curator based on the Kwanghan territory in Victoria, BC. Using sculpture, sound, installation, and performance, his work pulls at the threads of time. Finding channels into the past and future, Campbell reconstructs broken somatic, communal, and spiritual connections, creating spaces of solace and meaning for all of us living in the wake of slavery and colonization. His most recent work recreates the submerged terrain where African and North American tectonic plates converge, bringing us in proximity to the realm of spirits lost in hundreds of years of forced Atlantic crossings. Campbell's artworks have been exhibited widely in the Caribbean, Canada, and internationally. Recent exhibitions include The Other Side of Now at the Perez Art Museum in Miami, How Not to Be Seen at the Remy Modern, and Vancouver Special Disorientations and Echo at the Vancouver Art Gallery. Campbell is the recipient of numerous awards and holds an MA in Fine Arts from Goldsmiths College and a BFA from Concordia University. His exhibition, How Many Colors Has the Sea, is currently showing at the Power Plant Gallery, and his upcoming exhibition, An Ocean to Livity, opens at the Art Gallery of York University in January. Our next artist is Syrus Marcus Ware. Syrus is a Vanier scholar, visual artist, activist, curator, and educator. Using painting, installation, and performance, Syrus works with and explores social justice frameworks and Black activist culture. His work has been shown widely, including solo shows at Grunt Gallery in 2018, Touch Change, and Will Abale Art Projects in 2021, Irresistible Revolutions. His work has been featured as part of the inaugural Toronto Biennale of Art in 2019 in conjunction with the Ryerson Image Center. Antarctica and Ancestors, Do You Read Us? Dispatches from the Future, as well as for the Bent Ways Safety in Public Spaces Initiative in 2020, Radical Love. Syrus has participated in group shows at the Never Apart in Montreal, the Art Gallery of Ontario, the University of Lethbridge Art Gallery, the Art Gallery of York University, the Art Gallery of Windsor, and as part of the current content at Nuit Blanche in 2017, The Stolen People Won't Back Down. His performance works have been part of festivals across Canada, including at Cripping the Stage, Complex Social Change, and Decolonizing and Decriminalizing Trans Genres. Our next artist is Karin Jones, who is an interdisciplinary artist with a background in jewelry. She received a diploma in jewelry and art design from Vancouver Community College in 1993, before embarking on a 20-plus year career as a goldsmith and independent artisan. Since 2007, her work has moved away from traditional jewelry and into sculpture and contemporary art. She received an MFA in craft from NSCAD University in 2018, where she began her most recent work dealing with the ways historical narratives shape our sense of identity. Her work is held in the permanent collections of the Royal Ontario Museum, the Vancouver Art Gallery, and the Metal Museum in Memphis, Tennessee. Chantal Gibson is an award-winning writer, artist, and educator living on the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish peoples. Working in the overlap between literary and visual art, her work confronts colonialism head-on imagining the BIPOC voices silenced in spaces and emissions left by cultural and institutional erasure. Her visual art has been exhibited widely across Canada in galleries and educational institutions, as well as the United States. She is an author of 2 poetry collections. Her debut book, How She Read, explores the representations of Black women in Canadian history, art, and literature. It won the 2020 Pat Lowther Memorial Award and the 2020 Dorothy Livesay Poetry Prize, and was shortlisted for the prestigious 2020 Griffin Poetry Prize. Her follow-up collection, With Holding, explores the representation of Blackness across digital media. Both works appear on secondary and post-secondary classroom teaching lists. In 2021, a 2021 3M National Teaching Fellow, Gibson teaches writing and design communication in the School of Interactive Arts and Technology at Simon Fraser University. Last but not least is the co-curator of the courses speaking, Jenelle Pasiechnik. Janelle has lived on Vancouver Island for 15 years and is the curator of contemporary art at the Campbell River Art Gallery since 2018. She is committed to being a good ally as a settler on the unceded traditional territories of the Liquidoth speaking people, the Way-Wikai and the Way-Wicum, and Kuyak with First Nations. Jenelle works through a research and relationship-based approach. She works to ensure that diverse communities see their experiences reflected in the cultural offerings of the institution to create community impact through exhibitions and programming that support the endurance of communities, the resurgence and celebration of diverse cultural perspectives, and the recovery of erased histories. She has completed her master's in art history and visual studies at the University of Victoria on the unceded territories of the Lekwungen-speaking people of the Songhees and Esquimalt nations in 2015. Her thesis examined transnational and post-colonial frameworks for studying art histories, the artistic traditions and modernity of West Asia, and contemporary West Asian artists of the diaspora living and working on Turtle Island. The Chorus is Speaking was co-curated with the Reme Modern Director of Exhibitions and Collections, Chief Curator Michelle Jakes. We are grateful to host the Chorus is Speaking in its second iteration and location on the lands of the Lekwungen, since it first opened in Campbell River at the Campbell River Art Gallery in 2022. In their latest essay that places this exhibition within the lands of the Lekwungen, Michelle and Jenelle share that this exhibition speaks to facets of the Black experience on Turtle Island and is the expression of their curatorial partnership. It is their hope that echoes Charles Campbell's sentiments, that the diverse artworks communicate in ways that Black folks viscerally connect to, and that they will create opportunities for those community members to feel joy in being recognized and celebrated. I would like to encourage all of you to read Michelle and Jenelle's latest essay, For the Chorus is Speaking, located at the front desk of our gallery and posted on our website. With that, I just, again, like to thank everybody for coming, and I'm going to pass the mic to Charles Campbell.
Thank you for a lovely introduction, Laura Lee, and thank you, Terry, for the beautiful welcome. I'm just up here to offer a libation to our ancestors. When we arrive not only as ourselves, but with the histories that we bring, and the spirit of our ancestors. So I just want to acknowledge them and invite them into the room with us, and also acknowledge the ancestors of this territory and the generosity that this territory offers us as well. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. With that, I would like to hand the mic over to Jenelle to begin the panel. But first, can we give the artists and the co-curator a big round of applause? Woo!
Hello. Oh, great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Laura-Lee, for the wonderful and generous introduction, and thank you, Terry, for your wonderful words and for welcoming us onto the territory. And thank you to these amazing rock stars for being here today. I'm very proud of this exhibition and that it has come onto these territories, and I'm excited for you all to get to know these amazing human beings today. So, to begin, let's get to know these artists a little bit. We'll start with Charles, down on the end there. What are your roots, Charles? Who are your people?
Thank you, Janelle. So I was born in Jamaica and lived there until I was 5 years old. Going farther back, my roots are in West Africa, and it's largely Scotland and England. As far as my people, that's always feels like a complicated question. When I go home to Jamaica, there's a way that I feel embraced by the culture there and by the sort of depth of my family connections in that space, and people who don't even know me say, "Oh, you're Johnny's son" or whatever. And there's something that really is validating about that I never get to experience on this territory. But then there's always a division with the fact that I haven't shared the life experiences of a lot of those people. I haven't grown up on that land, so that's always a really complicated question. Who are my people? I'm still looking for them. Thank you.
Okay, Syrus, your turn.
Do I have to? Oh, there you go. Yeah, thank you. I was born in Ojo Agi in Montreal, and my dad's family is from Memphis, Tennessee, and we spent many generations on slave labor camps there. I'm only the second generation born off of a slave labor camp in my family. And then on my mom's side, she's from the UK, but specifically from the north, from Yorkshire. And her family settled here, and my dad came up during a really fun and funky 1970s craft fair, and they met, and as a result, voila, je suis ici. So that's definitely what my roots are. And then my people are very much, like, I feel kinship and love and care and connection most comfortably with other Black trans people. And so I would say my people are, Marsha P. Johnson. My people are Monica Forrester, who's a Black trans activist in Toronto. My people are other, folks who have been in the struggle with me to make sure that trans life is cherished. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karin Jones, and my people come from West Africa as well. By my dad's side of the family, we came from West Africa through the United States hundreds of years ago and ended up in Nova Scotia over 200 years ago. So I'm part of that community there. And what else did I want to say? And my mom is from Germany, so I grew up speaking German as well. And I guess that question of who are my people, I don't really know. I do connect with people over a number of different things, but I also feel lucky that my art has also brought me into this community of Black artists and having more conversations with Black people as well. So That's me.
Hi, is it working? Oh, there we go. Okay, so my roots. This is really interesting because when I wrote How She Read, on the cover is my mom's kindergarten picture from 1956 Halifax. And I just found out a few months ago, my aunt sent me this family tree to the mid-1700s of my family, Skinners and Dorringtons. People in Nova Scotia know each other, so if there's anybody from Nova Scotia. So it's really something that I've spent a lot of time not knowing, my ancestors and when you have my parents divorced when I was a kid, and so when you have these gaps in your history, you really depend on the other people in your family to fill those for you, and that's where you need stories. And they say, I remember your auntie so and so, or your grandmother had it. So I'm having this really interesting experience with a family tree that looks like a tree. So the next time you see me, maybe I'll have learned more. But when I think about who my people are, it's funny, I was thinking about this. I've been on a writing residency on Bowen Island. I'm working on a novel, and it takes place in 1990s Davie Street, Vancouver, which is where those are the folks that raised me. So before I became a teacher, before I became anything else, I was 20 years old, managing a hair salon on Robson Street, came from a very small town in northern BC with a huge afro that really needed a snazzy, jazzy cut. And that is the community that formed me. And so in that hair salon and on Davie Street was every kind of person from all over the world. And the thing I was thinking about is, has any of you heard of Little Sisters Bookstore? Yeah, so I used to go to the old Little Sisters bookstore when I started my undergrad at UBC. And I met Audre Lorde at Little Sisters bookstore because they didn't have Audre Lorde at UBC bookstore. I met Dion Brand and Little Sisters, and I was kind of broke, and so I would sit on the floor and read the books, and they never kicked me out. So I am a product. I have been loved by the queer community. I've been loved and raised by Davie Street when we were part of the 1%. You know how Black people, they say in Vancouver, is always 1%. So I'm part of the 1%, which is a really awesome thing. But I'm one of those people that has absolutely been nourished and raised and loved in queer culture. And so that book is my love song to Davie Street.
Thank you so much. I am learning new things here today, too. This is very exciting. So let's dig a little bit into each individual artist's practice. In Jan Wade's wonderful catalog for Soul Power, she states that she sees all art as being a self-portrait. I would like to bring to light and focus on each one of your artistic practices. Thinking about your own work, who are you honoring, acknowledging, or speaking to? What stories are you telling? Would you like to go first, Charles, or should we switch around a little bit? Okay, Karin, you feeling ready?
I was just reaching for my microphone. Not
Terrible timing.
Yeah, so I guess I'm inspired by the stories of my ancestors because I do think that that they really obviously played a huge part in where we are today and where I am today. And so, but I do think that, as Jan Wade says, art is a self-portrait. So it's me working through our complicated histories and my family history and how we came to be here, and thinking about how those stories have shaped me and how our relationships to the people around us and the world around us and society, how that shapes us or shapes like the way that we see ourselves.
Thank you, Karin. Syrus?
Yeah, thank you. My practice is really concentrated on ensuring that we survive. So I've been doing portraits of people really large scale, to kind of honor and celebrate and kind of give reverence to folks who, have done work to make our communities the places that we all want to live in. So I think I've been really trying to honor activists. I've done a lot of portraits of activists over the last 10 years. And then the work for this show, there are these portraits of trans people that I've been drawing with my mother at a time when, there's futures aren't assured for all of us. It's a scary time to be a trans person on Turtle Island and probably all over the world. And so, trying to honor particularly BIPOC trans folks, who just are changing the world by getting up and breathing, by going to sleep, by being alive. So just trying to honor and acknowledge them. And then I think I'm really trying to make work that both helps people who aren't in those communities to want to reach out and figure out how to activate themselves and support these communities, and also for young people to look at these works and to think, there's an adult who's survived and who, seems to be smiling and looking out at me with their favorite flower and, is telling me a story about why they love ranunculus. And so maybe that's a possibility for me too, So it's like creating possibility models, and that's really who I'm speaking to. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Charles?
Yes, so there are a lot of questions packed in that little one. I find when I think of like who I'm speaking to, it changes a lot in terms of the process of the work as well as the kind of the end product of the work. So a lot of the process of the work is actually engaging, like I'm doing these sort of series of works with breath right now, so I'm engaging one-on-one with members of the Black community and just inviting them in to have a space to breathe with me, and that has been like really profound happening between myself and the person I'm sitting opposite to, and I feel I'm honoring that person and they're honoring me by sharing their breath with me and just having a space, as Syrus says, like just getting up and living and breathing should be enough to validate our existence. We don't have to do anything else. As people that live and are alive, that's we should be honored. I'll be honored for that work. In terms of the stories I'm telling, I feel I'm trying. It's more that I'm trying to unearth stories. Like I'm trying to find my own story in how my ancestry lives in my own body, how I can live in this world, how we can create space for one another, how I feel like it's because a lot of the stories are counter to that, like the narratives that are out there, they push us in a different direction, they make us defensive, they undermine us, so I'm trying to find our stories in a way that are like how they live with us and how they enliven us and enable us to kind of occupy space more fully and more in a more alive way.
Wonderful. Thank you. Chantal?
Okay, so I guess in terms of who maybe I'm honoring, so all of the work in this room, so I really enjoy messing around with old history books and old school books. And what I think about, so in this particular collection is I'm using liquid rubber, which is kind of standing in for tar. And so part of what I'm trying to do with this is to kind of to make visible the erasure, the omissions, the atrocities, the history that is happening inside these books that when we have not historically been written into history. But I'm also thinking about through the material, the story I'm trying to tell is materials that have been used against us to misrepresent us are being used in the storytelling. So part of the story is in the material that I'm using. If I was thinking about a self-portrait, there's a piece called Death of Wolf. So how many of you have heard of the Death of Wolf when you took a history course or you've seen it in a Okay, so it's one of those stories like you learn in Canadian history that, Wolfe and Montcalm, and Wolfe died on the Plains of Abraham, and there's this famous painting that's at the ROM. And when I was writing How She Read, I thought, how weird that I can tell you about the death of Wolfe, but I cannot tell you about my ancestors. And so that piece in there is actually that portrait of reclaiming a book and erasing that story and imagining my own, right? So imagining absence as actual material. And so if you have been, raised in the Canadian school system, and, I'm in my late 50s, right? So I've, kind of had all kinds of interactions with textbooks and history books. One of them is actually a book that I had in high school. And when I saw it in a secondhand store, it's like the one with the Mountie on it. And I had a visceral reaction to the book. And it wasn't like, yay, that's my book. I was like, I know that book. So they somehow I have embodied whatever messages they were trying to present. And my work is trying to kind of reconfigure that in a way that I feel whole and that I've been able to speak back to that omission.
Thank you so much. So now I'm going to read you a quote from an article by Yanya Lee from 2016, How Canada Forgot Its Black Artists. The author states that Canadian Blackness is constantly seen as recent and uniform, and this fails to incorporate the rich and subtle diversity of Black communities across the country. This exhibition opened at the Campbell River Art Gallery in 2022, as you know, and now we're here 2 years later in 2024. So I'd like the artists to consider how things have changed over that course of those 2 years. What are your thoughts on this statement? Is this still the case? And are there examples of Black representation that go against this or model a better way? Let's start with Charles.
Ooh. So things I feel are in flux currently. We are aware of 2021 and the murder of George Floyd and the this sort of supposed sort of enlightenment that society was going through at that moment where all of a sudden, Black Lives Mattered, and we were told repeatedly that was the case, and there almost was a search for that sort of validation within each community too. All of a sudden, Black figures within the community became sought after for to kind of demonstrate their, in a way, each community's kind of position in that present, and how this global phenomenon was being acknowledged within specific communities and within the context of the art world in particular, that has resulted in a shift, and it's quite a genuine shift in terms of opportunities that were available to artists, in terms of visibility of Black artists, and so on. And now I'm pretty sure everyone at the table is going to agree we're seeing that slip away. We're seeing that, or we're seeing a re-entrenchment of the previous status quo that is very upset that it doesn't always get the stage that it thought it naturally deserved, and it doesn't always get the privileges that it previously could have assumed that it was entitled to, and that this space is being taken up by really too many brown people, and so that flux is in play right now, with all the time, and there's different positions. It's not equal everywhere, and there's different things that are happening everywhere, and there's also a lot of some people are going to kind of the tide's going to wash back, and we're still going to be standing, and some people are going to get washed back, but the tide, I think, is changing quite significantly, and that sort of it is revealing kind of the actual power structures. So there's not this sort of that kind of initial wave was I felt often, it wasn't necessarily driven out of genuine concern. It was driven out of a kind of the moment being, it was institutional needs. But some people did, like, there were sincere voices within that were taking advantage of that to move the ball sincerely in a way, and I think that, and those voices are now actually being undermined and a threat. So that's my I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of things to say about that.
Well, I think it's all the more important that we're here today, and I appreciate everyone's presence here. Cyrus, you look like you're...
Yeah, sure. Very happy to talk about this. You know, there was that book, Mounting Frustrations, by Susan Cahan, you know, that came out in 2017, that looks at the role of the art museum and the art world, I suppose, in moments of, in relation to Black Power. And one of the things that she found through her research was that galleries and museums and institutions typically only engage with Black artists and their work during times of civil unrest and in response to calls from the community because of civil unrest. And the way that they engage are in predictable patterns, like a kitchen table gallery or pre-gate, a smaller exhibition gallery off to the side, maybe an Instagram takeover, all of these temporary, non-permanent engagements. And then the things like acquisitioning into the permanent collection rarely actually happens. And so the kind of, making the structural changes doesn't happen, but these sort of demonstrative shows of support of Black artists is what she had sort of been tracking. And we saw that. We saw that from 2016 onward. During the uprisings of 2020, of course, there was famously Blackout Tuesday, with the institutions all blacking out their Instagram profiles and Facebook profiles to make these commitments that were largely eradicated within 2 years, you know? So the commitment of funding, the commitment of time, the commitment of programming to what might be considered EDI initiatives were rapidly clawed back or turned back. And a lot of the folks who were hired during that wave of initiatives in 2020 were either hired into untenable jobs, you know, where they were the only Black person in a department, the only Black person in an institution, the only Black person in a leadership council, or were hired into jobs that were impossible to do, you know, where there was maybe 150 years of legacy white supremacy that was not in any way changing, and this one person was put in to be the face of this change that no one seemed to want. So we've seen that a lot, and I saw a lot of folks, you know, in these positions that we all celebrated. We celebrated, you know, so-and-so becoming the head of, you know, this university or institution, and so being hired to senior counsel at the AGO, and so-and-so. We saw all of that. And then, you know, where is the news about all of the people who have left or been fired, which is what's happened. So that all of that to say, it's never been about us waiting for those in power to make the change happen. You know, it was never going to be that the change was going to come through those initiatives, right? So we continue to curate in different ways. We continue to make art. We continue to resist. We continue to make change. And that is going to keep happening. I think that when you said, Charles, the wave is pulling people back, but some of us are already standing here, and we will continue to stand here, and we will continue to braid the ocean, you know, as the waves come in. And I think that makes me feel really encouraged about the future of Black arts here, is that we will continue to keep fucking it up as we do, and you know, despite the fact that the system's always going to revert back to a white supremacist normal. Yeah.
Can I respond to that?
Please.
So thank you for that response. You covered a lot of territory, and I'm so glad that you mentioned the EDI initiatives, right? Because those are just not in art institutions, educational institutions. Basically, any company since 2020 has had to probably think about, what EDI looks like for them. And I will say that I was one of those people that was hired in a position. I teach at Simon Fraser University, and I was asked to kind of take on like an associate dean role. And I didn't want to be an associate dean because I didn't think you could do that work as an associate dean. So I said I would do it as an advisor. And what was interesting is in my first year, I would get emails from folks saying, I want to introduce you to so-and-so, and they were the EDI person for some institution, and they left after a year. Like I was getting emails introducing me to people that had left their jobs, right? And so I feel like, that is the strategy that I had to use was that the EDI didn't particularly work for me, but I knew that I wanted to be a part of a group that was about equity, community, and care. And I knew that I couldn't do it for a whole institution. And so I worked with like 18 faculty really close to me, Black, Indigenous, Asian, like just across all the spectrums, a small group. And I think that that's really the saving grace for me is working small and with care and compassion and not trying to this call, I did a talk a few years ago and the institution had hired 2 Indigenous faculty to basically roll back colonialism for the entire institution. And, so I think it's actually important to have this conversation because part of the wave is that we're not able to, we're not able to bear the weight of history, but that's not our job, right? And then I guess the other thing that I wanted to, just mention is February. So I have a really strong position in February. I was asked 2 weeks ago to do something, if I would be interested in doing something for Black History Month. And I'm like, no, because every day for me is February. And so it's just really part of my way of, and I see the discomfort in the moment, right? And they're like, oh, okay, I totally get what you're saying, right? But I feel like this push to kind of let's stuff everything about Black people in 1 month, I'm not hip to that, and I make it very clear when I'm asked, and I go, why don't you invite me another time? I would be happy to come back, because even that packaging of history, of Black History Month, I feel has gotten away from maybe how it was originally intended. So thank you for your response, because I feel it. I feel it.
Thank you so much. Karin?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I have a friend that I've known since high school who's a fairly successful white male artist. And he's been successful partly because he's really good at self-promotion and business. And I used to go to him for advice about my art career, but I don't anymore, because he said to me recently that I should take every opportunity I can right now, because he was implying that our moment in the sun is kind of coming to an end. So, and that I wouldn't always be getting as many opportunities as I am now. And and we all wonder if that's true, right? And it's just okay, well, we have to, like you said, we're still here, we're still gonna be making our art and showing it in whatever way we can. But that often feels like it might be a reality, I don't know.
Thank you so much. I just want to thank you all. I know that these can be difficult subjects to address, and you are very articulate, and you have these incredibly valuable points of experience. I also love ECC. We should adopt that. Equity, community, care. Yes. Thank you. Okay, so now let's continue talking about your relationships with history. How does history play a role in your artistic practice, in your lives? In A Map to the Door of No Return, Dion Brand states, Black experience in any modern city or town in the Americas is a haunting. One enters a room and history follows. One enters a room and history precedes. History is already seated in the chair in the empty room when one arrives. Where one stands in a society seems always related to this historical experience. I welcome your reflections on that statement and the role history plays in your lives and practices. Who would like to begin?
I'll go. Okay. Well, as somebody that likes to dismantle history books, I guess, in a way, I sort of think about like history as a material. For example, so there's a piece in there called When Africa Was a Country. And it is from a grade 3 social studies reader. And there's this trope, and I even remember it when I was in grade 4, these little reader stories. There's this trope of the pygmies of Africa, this little story that would always come up about these little people. And so I found it in this reader, but it actually said that Africa was a country. And for me, that just like all of a sudden I'm thinking of like all the histories that are coming together. So it's not just the fact that somebody wrote this for grade 3, but then I think about this was written, this was published, there were printers involved, there's a whole kind of educational system that puts out these books, and then I think about a teacher that has taught this material, and then I think about any child, whether it's a Black child or white child, Indigenous child, like the damage is being done, right? And so I guess what I think about often is that it's never one history. Like there's just all of these histories that are woven together. And as soon as you start thinking about the systemic, so it's never just a book, right? It is never, ever just a book. If you're holding a book and it's been mass produced, then everybody's in on it, right? And so I guess that's kind of the way I use history as a material. And I just try to kind of think about what's intersecting or overlapping, and then I just have this joyous moment of dipping the book in rubber and sealing it so nobody can ever read it again.
Yeah, I'll go next because I obviously work a lot with history because I've made this replica of Queen Victoria's wedding dress, and I've done some other stuff like that. Like I did a top hat made of braids, and I did another Victorian dress made of braids, and all of that is a result of me looking to history to try and understand where we are today, because I always feel like that's the answer. Like I'm sure there are other ways to understand what's going on today, but for me, I always need to understand what's been going on in the past to bring us to this present moment. And I spent a year in Quebec, and I was trying to understand the Quebec society, and then, the racism there, and how in the rest of Canada, we almost see Quebec as like the most racist province. I feel like that's sort of a perception that we have of Quebec. So I wanted to understand where that came from. So of course I was talking to Quebecers, and I made friends with a Quebec nationalist to understand his point of view, but I also was reading a lot about their history, and that really told me a lot about what's happening there. And so it's, for me, like even if I make work that doesn't actually look like historical dresses, which I've done in the past, a lot of it definitely, history always informs my work.
Thank you.
Yeah, history is important to my work as well. I have been working a lot with family history in my practice, and so I'm working on remounting a play that I first mounted in 2022 at Summerworks, and it's about an intergenerational story of this mixed race family and about madness and about disability and about police brutality and about all of these things sort of woven together. And it's been really incredible to use theater and performance in my practice as a way to kind of think about history across time and what's similar and what's different. And there's this thread of activism that sort of moves through the work. And you know, that's sort of one very literal way, is working with family history. And then also, I'm very moved and interested in this idea of Sankofa, this idea that, you know, comes from the Ashanti people in Ghana and West Africa, and this idea of being the symbol from the Adinkra language, which is this pictorial language that they used for Sankofa. There was two symbols. One you probably have seen with the heart, with a spiral sort of at the top of the top part of the heart. And then the other symbol for Sankofa is a goose that's walking forward with its head looking back. And this importance of like being able to understand where you're going towards a futuristic direction by understanding where you had come from. So I work a lot with this idea of ancestors, but in a speculative fiction way. So I've been making videos and work set in the future in 2072 and 2080, where we are the ancestors of this generation that's in the future. And so in this video work I made, Ancestors, Do You Read Us Dispatches from the Future, our great-great-grandchildren finding a way to use old technology. They message us in the past from 2072 to tell us what they need us to do in order for them to have this beautiful free future that we get to see them experiencing. Spoiler alert, overthrow capitalism. But yeah, working with the future also as a way to think of ourselves as part of history. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Lovely. I love that Dion Brand quote, and starting with this idea of history as this haunting, because a lot of our history remains undocumented, unknown. Like the specifics of my family, how they actually got, or where they were actually from on the African continent, how they actually got here. It's undocumented, but it's still present. It's present in my body. It's present in the room, and then the other histories that are present, that are kind of projected upon us. The sort of history of an unacknowledged kind of white supremacy that has kind of driven a lot of our relationships and how we're perceived. And so when Brand talks about how we're sitting, like we arrive and the history's already there, sitting in the chair before us. It feels really real to me. It's like I feel like I'm kind of wading into this space where my body is seen through this kind of distorted kind of specter of history that is projecting onto me. So I guess a lot of my work is kind of trying to pull that apart, and pull that apart is kind of, I think, more of time and memory, and perhaps more than history, because kind of history has the kind of this historiography. There's a kind of a system of understanding and documenting history, whereas memory is a different kind of mode of accessing the past and the present, and kind of a way of kind of reconfiguring our position within time, and how we relate to time, and where we can go and where we have been. Sorry.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Can I just add one thing?
Yes, please.
I think the thing that I just need to ask my colleagues is, I guess the thing that always interests me is when folks talk about history, we talk about it something like it's in the past, and it's happening now. It's happening at this table. It's happening in this room, right? And I feel like some of the conversations around, especially maybe like at an academic level, right, is that maybe part of the way like some folks feel like we get control over knowledge is to kind of we package it, right, and then we can, and yes, you can have a history of Canada, or you can have the concise history of Canada, or the abridged, right? And so all of these things are kind of signaled in the title about what's been done, right? But when you think about a history of a people or of a culture, right, and not concise or abridged, but erased, unknown. And I just really love, Charles, when you talk about like it's in us, it's embodied in us. Like I don't know my ancestors, but if you look at these like swirly gene things that I have, there's a whole history book that exists inside of me, right? And I know that somewhere in the world there are other people, their history book is very similar to my own because it's inside of me. And I think that's why I appreciate your work so much, is because I really didn't think about, I get a little bit emotional, but I really didn't think about it in that way until we did the Breath Project. And the fact that I work so much with external information, but there's all of this genetic information that is meaningful, and that's where futurism comes in, right? And even what's the term that Saidiya Hartman uses? Critical fabulation, right? Like this is the place for us to express the unexpressible and to write the history that is never going to be written or published in a book. So I guess I just wanted to acknowledge the three of you because I had a feeling when you talked, and I know that that's history in me. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I'm happy to let you just run. So if you want to, you take over. So I'm going to shift direction a little bit and invite you to respond directly to the curatorial framing of the exhibition. So the concept of chorus as defined by Saidiya Hartman, or perhaps your own understanding and context for what the concept of the chorus may mean. So I will read this definition by Saidiya Hartman. The Greek etymology of the word chorus refers to dance within an enclosure. What better articulates the long history of struggle, the ceaseless practice of Black radicalism and refusal, the tumult and upheaval of open rebellion than the acts of collaboration and improvisation that unfold within the space of enclosure? The chorus is the vehicle for another kind of story, not of the great man or the tragic hero, but one in which all modalities play a part. Not a leader and mass, where the untranslatable songs and seeming nonsense make good the promise of revolution. The chorus propels transformation. It is an incubator of possibility, an assembly sustaining dreams of the otherwise. Has the show changed the way you understand this idea? Was this an effective container for your artwork, for dialogue, for the exhibition? What comes up for you around this concept of the chorus?
Okay, I'm just full disclosure. Okay, so I do work in an academic institution, and I recognize that some things just go over my head. So when I heard the choruses speaking, like I'm thinking like the best part of the song, like like September, like party, with the claps. That's what I'm thinking about chorus, right? Like I'm thinking this is the best of, like this is the part. After the first, the verse, then you get the chorus, and it's the part that you're waiting for at the end. And when you're at a wedding or a celebration and everybody's on the floor, that's what I thought of the chorus. So I was like, wow, this is really, you've gone to Saidiya Hartman. This is really deep. I wasn't even thinking about that. I found the first show, and I see this, and it's just so joyful for me. So I don't need the Greek part. Right, and I mean, again, right, like I love Saidiya Hartman. I just never thought about it in that way. I've always really, when I saw chorus and heard chorus, that's what it was for me.
I also went somewhere totally different with it, and getting to see the show in Campbell River and now here, I had initially been thinking. I mean, I'm an activist. I've been an activist for a really long time, and one of the critiques or one of the things that people say is, "Oh, you're just speaking to the chorus. Like it's somehow not as relevant because you're speaking to people who believe similar things to what you believe." And I would argue that because I don't know that I'm just speaking to the chorus, but then I was like, oh, but that's who I'm committed to. Of course I'm speaking to my community. Of course that's part of who I'm speaking back to. So the work that I was making, like the piece for Campbell River and these works here, are absolutely speaking to people who are already in a bit of a conversation. And I think that, like, to me, that's where the action is going to happen. I mean, that's where our kinship models come in. That's where, you know, our moving at the speed of trust and being able to deepen our conversation and our understanding. And quite frankly, even within activist communities, there's a lot of people who have work to do around trans justice who, you know, need to be part of this conversation. And so, you know, I'm also thinking about, like, what does it mean to kind of change the shape of who the chorus is and who is our chorus? And so that's where I kind of went when I heard it. Yeah.
I love that. And it makes me think of, if you're speaking to the chorus, you can create this understanding or a system of call and response because they're right there with you and they're going to speak back with you. And you get this amazing exchange, and that creates a certain amount of power.
Mm-hmm. And it, you know, very literally, like, singing releases endorphins, and us singing with multi-harmonies together, like this quote kind of suggests, I mean, that's, I think, part of why you're describing joy. And I feel the joy as well, seeing the work, but also being here with all of you. Like, it's very much a chorus I want to be speaking to, so.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, as some of you know, I had a very negative reaction when I heard the title of this show, and it had to do with stereotypes of Black people, like that we're all going to be clapping and swaying in our robes and like this Black church choir, which is obviously, like, it's not a negative thing to me. Like, I've been to churches where there's 200 people in the choir, and it's like this amazing experience, like spiritual and experience of community. And so it wasn't that I had the reaction to. It was just that, you know, like, we're artists, we're contemporary artists, and I felt like I had grown up with, there are only certain contexts that you see Black people in, and one of them was that, like the Madonna video, where there's like a Black choir. And so I was like, and then the other association I had was, because I haven't studied Greek tragedy, which I'm sure most of you haven't actually studied in a very detailed way. I thought of it as, okay, the chorus are the people that are backing up the main action, and that aren't the main characters. And so then it was like, well, am I a backup singer to my own life or something? And so I really didn't like the title. And I also know that Saidiya Hartman, who is this author that many people have read and respect, I haven't read her. So I mean, I'm sure that her definition of the chorus is one that's positive and that might resonate with the way this show was created. But I think when you name a show, you have to think of, like, what's the experience of the people that are coming to it, and how are they going to see it, and not expect that everyone has the same academic background that informs how that title was chosen.
I'm really glad that you pushed back too, because it really forced me to define it, think about it. What really resonated, the idea of the chorus, is this sonorous group that is harmonizing together, but also you hear each individual register on its own, and they both speak in unison, but you can hear each voice very clearly. And so it does kind of encapsulate a lot of what we've been saying. And I do love Hartman's definition, but I also love that everybody holds their own way of seeing and thinking and being in the chorus, which feeds that concept of community and individuality kind of happening simultaneously. Charles?
I think I was somewhat ambivalent towards the title. I did see kind of Karin's point, I think I just thought of it as, you know, the people that were in the background being foregrounded, so there was a question, it's like, oh, are we really in the background or not? That's sort of how I understood the impulse of the, and I feel like we the people in the show here speak with very strong individual voices. We're not all in the same register. There might be a way that we resonate with each other, but there's also a way that there's very individual work here. So I wasn't sure how well that framing fit what was actually here in the room, but nor did I find it objectionable. It was it's a title. So that's kind of where I left it. Yeah.
Can I just add something?
Please,
so I guess, one of the things that, just to circle back, so when you first approached me about being in the show, like I remember our very first email, I still have it. And one of the conversations that we've had first by email, and then we talked on the phone, is that, like, I don't know, there was a run for a while for me, like if there was a show and there, Black artists were invited, it was kind of like, can you, bring some work so you can talk about your oppression? And this is like, we're going to curate, your critical responses to history, right? And somehow, and what I loved about our conversation is that I've just had experiences where folks think, like, because I'm doing that work, like I'm this like tortured, entrenched, person, right? And it's just like, I feel deeply, right? Like I feel deeply, but also that work brings me joy. It's how I cope. It's how I move through the world. It's how I be in kinship with folks, right? And so one of the things that we talked about, I said, I'm not interested in being in any show that doesn't have joy. And that was our early conversation. And I think that's actually really important, because like even some of the points that Syrus has made already, right? It's just like, we're just really in some fucked up times right now. I'm weird that this is being recorded. But, we need joy. We need UVic with this beautiful flower. Like, you need to have these like counter voices that are sewn in, right? Because I mean, for me, that's the whole point of doing this work, right? So when you go to shows that are, whether feature Black artists or whatever, BIPOC artists, right? It's just like you have to be able to see the richness, right? And it's just not this flatness. And I feel like that's what I'm taking away from, kind of from this conversation. And I didn't know that anybody even thought about the title, right? Like, but it's really actually kind of good that it's kind of messed up. Like,
I think what I've appreciated about being part of the show is the opportunity to get together with other artists, and kind of speaking to that earlier question about kind of from Yania Lee's quote about where we are right now and what has changed. I think what is changing for me is the solidarities that we're cultivating amongst ourselves as a group that make us a lot stronger together. And it's sometimes these are facilitated by kind of institutional engagements, but a lot of the time they're self-initiated, and they're actually what is going to sustain us and keep us going in a really kind of profound and important way. And it's those tracks that I'm way more interested in than the kind of the temporary and kind of precarious institutional kind of engagements that we find we may or may not have opportunities for in the coming forward. So.
Thank you so much. I think that's really a beautiful place to end my set of questions. I'd like to welcome the audience members to ask any questions if you have some. Please.
I have a question for Charles, please. I'm remembering a comment you made about memory, and I'm thinking of it in relation to history. Do you contemplate a contemporaneous documented account of memory within the context of history?
So I would say I don't consider that to be my work. It would be the short answer of it. I think it is. Some people engage in that work, and it's meaningful because it enlivens the histories and makes kind of it gives those histories a sort of a substance, a tangible substance. I've often been really, really careful in my work not to explain either myself or my culture. And that's a choice that I make. My validity in this space doesn't actually depend on you understanding me. It is just arrives when I arrive, and it is here for all of us just because we're here. And so I have this quite conscious choice to so for example, in the breath work I'm doing, I take people through this sort of memory journey for their ancestors, and that's like really important journey for them to take. And I choose not. Then often at the end of it's done internally for the person, and then at the end of the process, I will say, do you have anything you want to share with me? And I turn off the recorder, and I don't ever record that information. And it's not that it's like beautiful. Some of them are really beautiful, powerful stories that I think could move people. But you're just here to breathe. I'm not actually going to extract this story from you. And that's not going to be the substance that I'm going to be working with. I'm just like, I'm getting your permission to record my breath, to record your breath. And that's just, it's a personal artistic strategy. And I think there's a lot of very valid work that assumes another strategy, but that's kind of where I go with that stuff.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? I just got to thinking a little bit, Charles, when you were saying that not all of these artists are necessarily working in the same register, and I really agree with that. And I think you'll find when you're going around and you're reading about each work and you've learned about these artists here is that they have these kinds of amazing webs of connectivity that are working around and across the room, and you'll see these connections that they have with one another, with the ideas that they're working with, or even the ways that the work kind of speaks across. And so that is one of the things that I find really exciting about the diversity of the work in the exhibition and the diversity of the artists is that in the end you get this really fulfilling and kind of fulsome conversation after you've gone through everything, and you do see these threads that you can pick and collect. So I guess I just wanted to kind of address that and say that, because I think it's like a kind of like an amazing journey, I guess. Please.
This is sort of to the whole group of artists. The little cards that you get to write your information on are so short. So I wondered as I was walking around, is there anything you want people to know about your work that you couldn't put on these little info cards?
That's a good question. That is such a good question.
Where to begin?
Actually, I could start. So the dress that's here was actually, it was a reiteration of a previous idea. And that previous idea was something that I created in 2014. There was a call from the Royal Ontario Museum that they wanted a site-specific work to address the presence or absence of Africans in Canada's historical narrative. So I made this Victorian dress out of black braids, and it was a little different from this one because it was all braided instead of having some dreadlocks, and it had a high collar, and so it was more like a morning dress. And after they commissioned me to make it, they said they were going to commission it and have an exhibition for a few months, and then I would get it back and it would be mine to show in other galleries. But they ended up buying it from me, so it's now part of the permanent collection there, and which was really exciting. But at the same time, it's the ROM, and their conservation team is just really strict about what they lend out and what conditions it's under. And so I feel like that dress, which is a character, like it's a presence, can only travel to other exhibitions when they say it can. So, which is not often. And so I applied for a Canada Council grant to make another dress, because it's like really time consuming and expensive to make that. And so I'm happy with this one, and I do love it, and it was great to be able to make another one. But it was a result of this museum being protective of their property. And it makes me think about, it makes me think about what I want to do with my work. And I can, like with this work, because it's my own property, I can invite people who can't see very well to touch it and experience it in a different way. But that can't happen with the piece that's in the ROM. So, so that's a little story that's not on the card. Okay.
It's exquisite. I think if you Google it, there's an image, but it is an exquisite piece.
Thank you.
Yeah, it really is.
Anyone else?
I mean, I find there's always a lot of other things and it's always a question of how much I say and don't say, because I want the people to arrive at with their own connection to the work. But there's also a sense that, again, it's that kind of history preceding us and haunting us thing where the context that the work is shown in, because we're kind of in the society that we happen to live in, with the biases, and people will project those onto Black works. And I often do want to kind of speak back to, or help set the context for the work in a way that is somehow that will counter that kind of. I'm very happy to be identified as a Black artist. I'm not happy with people projecting all kind of baggage on what my work is about or what it can contain because of that. And so there's often things I do or I might want to say because of that, but it always varies in the context of any given exhibition, because we're working as a group here, and we're kind of finding and it's important to let people let the viewer in, and not let the work do its own work as well. So.
I think what's not on the label for mine is, these works, there's going to be 10 or 12 of them in total. It's a series that we're drawing of trans people with their favorite flowers as a love poem for them. But what you don't see is this complete transformation of a relationship, because my mother and I decided to do this project together, to collaborate. And I had been invited to go to the Fogo Island art residency out in Fogo, and invited her to come with me. And so we went to the most remote place you could go to, alone, and perched on a subarctic island. We learned how to love each other again, and we learned how to show up for each other again, and healed a lot of things that happened. She is a champion of trans rights now. But in our early times, when I first came out as a teenager, it was really hard. There wasn't the same resources and support and knowledge and information. And as my dad is quoted as saying, we didn't know what we were doing. They didn't know, and now they know, and they do better. And so that trip and this work, like working upstairs, downstairs in the studio, and then coming together and just doing this, healed probably generations of pain, that was there from long other queer people in the family who had ever had the chance to come together, and other trans people who might have never been able to be out or to have that healing. So you don't see that on the label, but these works are a drawing of a transformed relationship, one that is now assuring trans life. Yeah.
Thank you, Syrus. Wow.
It's interesting because I've been having conversations with other artists about exactly that, like what it's about and then what it's about, and there's always like a whole other life that you can't see, and the piece is all about that as well. I think for me, I'm a teacher. Like first and foremost, like I'm a teacher, and my pieces like this come out of like research creation, and my goal when I wrote my books and when I create these works is that they will help other people teach. So I feel like when I was in school, I was really like dosed up on somebody else's nostalgia, somebody else's good old days. So I am always in a street fight with nostalgia. And the only way sometimes that I can get folks to recognize, your good old days, they might have been good for you, but they weren't great for my ancestors, right? Or they might not have been so great for my mom, is to actually treat old texts as evidence. So where I get in a scrap with the cards is that I sometimes, so for example, there's a book, Streets and Roads, 1 and 2, and the middle part is all gummy. So that's the story of the tar baby. And the thing that I'm trying to do is to point to actual, this is what grade 2 and 3 children read in the United States and Canada, right? And there's lots of there's lots of other writers and artists that have kind of worked with like Sambo figures, but to me that's the place that I can go, like, I'm not making it up, like this is actually been printed and produced, and it's a way to bring a book into a space in a way that we are not taught to read. Like, reading is something that one person does with a book in your hand, and we take in, this is what colonialism does, is we get a set of rules, right? And so we read from right to left, and we turn pages, and we do it alone. And we don't do it as a group, and we don't stand around something, right? And we don't have a conversation about it, and so I feel like that's where the card, having a little bit more information, can be helpful, but then you don't want to do all the talking, right? So, and that's kind of, but it's a tough spot because I'm actually making a point, right? Like, yes, I would love for you to have interpretation, but some of these are pretty, I guess, pedantic in a way, some of them, because the point, it's non-negotiable for me, right? And I think that's where it gets a little bit hard for me.
Thank you.
That was a really good question.
That was a great question. Thank you. I think we have time for one more or two more questions if people are interested. Yes, please.
We're visiting from Toronto and Windsor, Ontario. We look around. We are both educators. I actually almost came to, Simon Fraser way back in the day. I saw the title. We were we saw it from a couple days and we wanted to come. And what the chorus, when I saw the chorus, I also thought that there is no one black voice, there is no thing. So I guess my question is, how are we bringing this to a broader community? Because someone like me may have missed this. Do you understand? My wife saw it, and I'm here because of her. But the discussion is very relevant. And so is there ways or vehicles that is like a next step to try to bring this to different communities or groups or whatever? I don't know if that kind of explains what I'm saying or not.
I think it's a really great question, and I think it's kind of started already. It came from north of us, 300 kilometers from an even more remote community, and because of the amazing artists and other folks coming from outside of their communities coming to see the exhibition, it grew more legs and has now come here. And so the more we kind of talk about it and share it, and the more I do my job as the curator and I go out and I tell people how important it is and I get them interested in it, then I think it also can grow even more legs. And I think that this show has a lot of potential to go far. So I guess that's my answer. Does anyone else have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about this just in terms of like preaching to the chorus, because I don't really have an answer for that. And I've been thinking about it recently because of the election in the US and how we're probably going to have another election in the next year or so, and how is that going to go, and thinking about like what can I do to feel like I'm pushing back against this tide of right-wing politics that seems to be kind of crashing in. And I'm thinking, okay, well, you know, like I thought, oh, I'm an artist, I talk about these issues, but like I often feel like, yeah, like people that come to galleries are not the people that I would want to influence with that kind of conversation, and I just don't really know how to, yeah, I'm still thinking about, I mean, this conversation is amazing, like, and I think it's important for us to have these conversations and to have them as much as possible. But I also just question, where can we take it, where it's going to have some real impact, and me not feeling like I just sat around and made art when the right-wing tide was washing over us. And yeah, I'm just still thinking about it.
Comment. So, you know, putting on an exhibition takes a certain amount of resources. It's a very involved endeavor. The artwork itself takes a lot of time and effort, and so there are practical limitations in terms of how that's going to travel and so on. But there's a lot, like these conversations, this like getting 4 people, 5 people, 6 people, 8 people together to have a conversation takes considerably less resources, especially in the age of Zoom and so on. So like one of the things I do fairly regularly, I did for a while, I hosted an online salon, and I invited just Black artists to come and chat with me, and we would get together once a month and have a talk, and and that was great. And you probably know some people that you might want to have that conversation with, or you might get my email and you say, hey, come like talk to my little group, and like that stuff can happen. And it's like we can empower ourselves to have those conversations and to set up a system or a network for ourselves to do that without reliance on an institutional authority to make it happen for us. We can, and that stuff is happening within, in little and big ways all the time, and often intermittently, and based on somebody who has the time to do the thing and inclination and so on. So, but I would encourage that we can have these conversations. It's not actually a scarce resource that we're like, most of us want to have these conversations. Most of us want to have an opportunity to engage with a broader public. Most of us would love an invite to say, hey, you had a really interesting, like, two of you, could you guys come in, or what time, what's your schedule like? Like, just do that. And and depending on, like, the AGO invites me, believe me, they're going to pay my artist fees. If it's like a little community group, like, I don't really care. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's a different thing. So I just think, like, empower yourselves to make these conversations happen if you enjoy these conversations, and it can happen.
Yeah. Can I just, thank you for that question. I think that one of the things that I recommend is that if you can reach out to a teacher, right, who happens to be an artist, or an artist that, does public work, like, Zoom is amazing. It has really kind of changed everything for me in terms of, like, I have been lucky enough to, like, I did a talk in a grade 2 class in Port Moody about my work, right? And it was during COVID. And I mean, talk about a tough audience, grade 2. And I was coming off of a bit of a high because some of my work was in a kids show at the Vancouver Art Gallery. And I had this red book with melted goo, and the kids could write down what they thought. And so one kid wrote down, I think this piece is saying there's not enough work about Black history, something like that. And then another one said, I think this has been sitting in the sun too long and the words dripped out, right? and so I was just like, so using art as a space for conversation, right? Especially maybe challenging conversations, like, let's not hit them with the colonialism yet. Let's just maybe use some objects. But I had a grade 2 class, and they're like all sitting there on the floor, and there's me, and like, I'm watching this amazing teacher that's trying to get these little kids somehow, like, talking about, the material, and they put up their hands and they ask questions, but somehow she's just trying to get them to think about this idea that somebody's missing, and Miss Gibson is just trying to figure out a way to show that they're there, right? And so I love that. And if we didn't have Zoom, I wouldn't be able to kind of go to these places. And so, like, reaching out and saying, I'm a teacher. Can you, when How She Read came out, like that was funny, because there's nothing like looking at a class that's been asked to write a poem, and they're like waiting for you to show up, right? And nobody wants to read their poem, right? So, there's been that. But the conversation that I want to have is with other teachers, right? But when I talk about the tough audience, like, I remember the last kid in the Zoom call, she just, there was like one of these really gooey books, and she just looked at the teacher and she said, you said we're not supposed to wreck books, right? and then this teacher, I just saw her kind of like trying to spin out, and she's like, well, remember we talked about recycling and reusing, and that's what Miss Gibson is trying to do, right? Like, just trying to, and in the end, there's this kid crying, right? But it's just like, I've been conned, right? But it's like, now you have a kid that is interested in art, right? Like, and I feel like that's the place. So, what the worst thing that can happen is you find the person, you send an email, and they can say, yes, I can, or no, I can't, but you might, like, create a whole new space for conversation with your classes. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, with that, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to these amazing artists. Thank you.
So thank you, everybody, for coming to the talk today. Thank you to the artists and the curator for bringing such a thoughtful discussion to us all today. I know, as an Indigenous person working in the arts, I really related to a lot of the things that you discussed. And, our ancestors are all around us, and I know that we carry them wherever we go. I know that because I found a picture of my grandma in the bookcase upstairs. In 2018, when I first started curating my first exhibition. And this building holds a lot of really powerful pieces. Even though they're in storage, we sometimes bring art to the classroom. This place is a place where the ancestors do come. And so I'm sure all of your ancestors, all of our ancestors are here right now, and I'm sure they're very proud of you all today. I am, and it's an honor to know you and host you. So thank you again. We are going to be doing a bit of a cleanup. We're going to shift into the reception, and we're going to open up the doors to the public now in case anybody wants to come in and enjoy the last hour of this exhibition for today. So thank you, and let's give the artists another round of applause.